Hi, I'm Joseph R. Lewis and I write adventures. And today I'd like to talk about one shots, what they are, how to design them, how to write them, and how to run them, particularly at a con. So, to start, I'd like to define what I'm talking about as a one shot. Obviously, we mean something that can be played in a single setting or a single sitting, but that can mean different things for different people and different systems. So, you need to be thoughtful as a adventure writer about what system you're writing for. And my experience has been that if you're writing for a crunchier system, something like Pathfinder or Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, because they are more mechanically complex systems and things like combat are slower, you need less content to fill your time. Versus if you have a rules light system, something like Cairn, which I run right now, uh, because there are fewer mechanics to interact with, more content can fill the same space. And for our purposes here, I'm thinking of something between 2 and 4 hours. Typically, especially at a con, where we have something like a 4 hour block of time that we're given to run our session. But also in real life, when we're sitting down to a game night, generally folks are playing a 2 to 4 hour session, with a lot of folks tending to prefer 2 hours. I know there's a lot of GM burnout that kicks in around that time. So we may be aiming for even shorter periods of time for our one shot that we're writing. So again, crunchy means less content, and rules light means more content to fill an equal amount of time. To give you a little bit of context from my experience, a couple years ago, I was a player in a fifth edition one shot at PAX Unplugged in Philadelphia. We had a great time. We had something like six total strangers sitting around a table one night, and we played for 2 to 3 hours, I think. And the adventure was pretty simple. As I recall, we entered a small village. We went to two or three houses and talked to a couple of NPCs. And then we went to the final location and we confronted the monster and had one combat. So something like three non combat encounters and one combat encounter was enough for six strangers to fill something like 2 to 3 hours of time. By contrast, I recently went to Game Face Con in Baltimore, where I ran a one shot, and I ran Desert Angel Fiasco, one of my adventures, and it contains 15 encounters. And of those 15, I ran 11 of them. I chose which ones I wanted to run, and I chose 11 of them to run in 3.5 hours of game time. And that was using Cairn. So again, a rules light system, you can have many more encounters crammed into about the same time as many fewer encounters in a crunchier system. And if I was to ballpark it, I would say something like 5 or fewer encounters in a crunchy system can fill 2+ hours of time versus having 10 to 15 encounters in a rules light system. So those are things to be keeping in mind as you're planning out the one shot adventure that you want to write. So, tips and advice for writing a one shot adventure. Number one, I think you want to have a tightly focused, clearly identified adventure space. That means the adventure is going to take place in a single building, on a single sailing ship, in a clearly defined cave system, something like that. Something where you can clearly say, the adventure is in here, whatever here is. And the adventure should start at the entrance of that space. So you don't want to have a long preamble. You don't want to have a wilderness crawl where they get to the adventure. And you don't want them to have some milling about time, at the inn or at the tavern where they're figuring out where is the adventure, where do they need to go. All of that is sort of low energy, dead time, downtime. And it can also feel confusing because the players may not understand where the adventure is yet and what they're supposed to do yet. And all of that time, whatever it is in real time, whether it's just 10 minutes or even half an hour or longer, it sort of detracts from the fun and the excitement of getting to sit down and try a new system or play a new adventure or play with a new GM or play at a con, whatever it is. People want to jump in and go. So we want to start the adventure at the entrance of the adventure space. Advice number two is going to be when you're designing your space and your rooms or your encounter locations, all of them should be active places where things happen. None of them should be dead spaces or empty rooms, essentially. And again, this goes back to what I was just saying a moment before. We don't want to have downtime or dead time or quiet time in a one shot. This is an opportunity to play with new people or to try a new system or whatever it may be. And when you go into an empty room, the players are going to ask all the regular questions. I touch this, I look at that. And if the GM's just answering, nope, you don't find anything, nope, nothing's there, uh, eventually the player's going to go, all right, well, I guess that was fun, and move on to the place where there's actually something to do. And while we want that realism in a big adventure, in a campaign, because there are empty rooms in real life, we don't want to do that in a one shot. We want to have almost constant something to do because we don't have much time, and we want to make the most of that time. So every room should have something. There should be a trap to get over, something environmental. There should be an encounter with an NPC or a monster. There should be an object they can obtain and feel, rewarded for having gotten there. So every room, every location, every space should have something to do. Should be exciting and interesting in some way. So no downtime. Advice number three is regarding combat. You want to be very thoughtful about the combat that you put into your adventure, and this goes back again to what system you're writing for. If you know you're writing for a crunchier system, something like Pathfinder or D&D, I would encourage you to have one, maybe two at most combats for your one-shot adventure, which will probably just be fighting the boss monster thing at the end of the space. And again, because there won't be enough time. Those longer combat encounters are going to take up more physical time at the table, uh, and we don't want to have multiple of those throughout the space. There won't be time. The GM will have to skip past them in order to get to the end to have a satisfying conclusion to the adventure. And at the other end of the spectrum, if you're writing for a rules light system like Karen, which I've been using, you can have many more combat encounters. You can have 5+ combat encounters in a one shot. Which, as you know from your system, can be played through very quickly. There may only be one hit and someone goes down, which is still exciting and fun. So be thoughtful about what type of combat you have and how many combat encounters you're building into your adventure. Advice number four, building on our combat discussion. You want to be thoughtful about the stat blocks that you're putting into your one-shot adventure, especially if they are novel, custom stat blocks that you're creating for your very special monster that goes in your adventure. Um, Again, you want to be thoughtful about the GM who is interpreting this at the table. They probably don't have a ton of time to prep or a ton of time to be sitting there and interpreting what you've written on the page before they look up and start running that in combat encounter. So you should keep your monsters straightforward, in the sense that they should only do one or two cool things. And there should not be a lot of complexity about what are they immune to, or what are they afraid of, or what do they need, or what do they look like. We want to keep it very straightforward so the GM can just glance at it and go and keep the momentum going at the table. Advice number five, almost building on what we just said a moment ago. When you're writing your adventure, I encourage you to use simple names for locations, NPCs, special objects, treasure, whatever it may be, because we want to keep it simple for the GM to communicate at the table. Especially if this is at a con, there could be a lot of background noise. It's hard to hear and hard to communicate. There could also be a lot of people at the table. When I was at Game Face Con just recently, I had 7 players all around me. I was in the center, and there was a lot of background noise. We were in a bar. So I was raising my voice. I was almost half shouting to the table to describe what was happening. And sometimes I would turn to one side of the table because I was trying to address these players. What do you do? What do you do? But I was very cognizant of the fact that I'm turning my back on the other half of the table. So I have to keep swiveling back and forth. And when you're struggling to communicate for whatever reason, simpler things to say, simpler words, simpler names is very helpful. Especially if you have those diligent players who are writing things down and trying to keep track, and they want to know the location. Who am I looking for? What was the name of the NPC? Who did we get this information from? You want to reward those people for paying attention by giving them information they can understand and write down, names they can remember, names they can say back to you, names that are unique from each other. You don't want all the names to sound similar, which is just something to help the GM and the players communicate and have a good time at the table. So that's all my advice for designing and running a one shot. Quick recap: we want to be thoughtful about how much time, usually 2 to 4 hours. Be thoughtful about the system you're using. If it's crunchier, you want less content and fewer combats. And if it's rules light, you probably want more content and you can have more combats. Um, you want to have a clearly defined adventure space and start the adventure at the entrance to it. You want everything to be highly interactive, no dead space. Um, Very few combats. Be thoughtful about how much time they're going to take up. Uh, be be thoughtful about how you write your stat blocks. Keep them simple. Use straightforward names that people can say clearly, especially in a loud, confusing environment that may be difficult to communicate in. And I think you'll do a great job. And that's all the advice I have for right now. So good luck out there.